Hi everybody, this is Mr. Karabi. I just wanted to be able to make this video as an introduction to the next unit, the Sexual Health and Human Sexuality unit that I will be teaching you for health class. This is being made on November 27th, 2020. This is the Friday after Thanksgiving, commonly known as Black Friday, historically because it was the first time that retailers would get out of the red, so to speak, in accounting. Red being negative, black being positive in terms of finances and income and whatnot. So in any case, this year with COVID-19, the sales were starting like 2 weeks ago. So nevertheless, we do have off still because it's combined with Thanksgiving for part of fall break. But I wanted to be able to make this video because we start the unit officially next week. And when I say that, uh, we've sort of started this unit throughout the year because we interlace different topics within other things that we do. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But just so that we point out, today's video is not anything about content. Today is only about what the content's going to be and resources and questions and things like that about the sexual health unit here this year. So I'm going to share my screen and explain to you what is going on. So here is the unit page for the website. Again, officially, the website's address goes down to karabihealthpe.com. You can even Google Mr. Karabi's class website, and you usually will be able to find it in one of the first results or first two results. And without showing you the navigation, because I've shown it on previous videos, you can either use the navigation menu at the top, or you can go and you can click health on the main page that you go to, and then click on one of the unit links that appears there to be able to get to where we're going. But in any case, the sexual health and sexuality, there's a little kind of like, what is this about on the top? And and basically what it says, without reading it word for you, because you could totally pause this and read it yourself. Um, for some teams, it can be the most challenging aspect of health. Like I argue that with our students, emotional health tends to be the most important, but it very much could be that this is the one that's the most active, so to speak, in terms of decision making. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. And we're going to look through some big questions during the course of this unit. What role do I want sex to play in my life is going to be a question that you hear me saying over and over and over again. There's also some other questions here having to do with the big parts of this particular unit, and the unit choice projects and constructive responses are here. There's some other assignments too that traditionally are given throughout this unit. I've decided to not give any of the more major assignments that are lengthier. These are going to be the only two things that we're going to do that are going to take you more than 5 to 10 minutes or so to do. So I have them on the unit page. So as you go down, there's a lot of questions. I want to scroll all the way down to the bottom first, because within the School District of Philadelphia, which is where I teach health education, they have adopted a program called the 3 R's curriculum. It is officially from the Centers of Disease Control, but it actually is a division of the Centers of Disease Control, which I always forget the name of. So I'm just going to click here to be able to show you that page. And okay, that didn't really help all that much. So let me go back. The rights, respects, and responsibility. Oh, sorry. Rights, respect, and responsibility. And when you click rights, respect, and responsibility, it's a program that's created by the CDC that goes and sorry about that. If you're watching this video, there was just a little error, and I'm picking up from where I left off. So, Rights, Respect, and Responsibility is a program created by the Centers for Disease Control. And if you scroll back up the page, and I kind of have it in two different places, so it's not really that organized, but I admit. But if you scroll back up the page, you'll see a section with a drop-down menu. It says, "Why teach a comprehensive unit in school?" And then includes a special note about district's current curriculum guidance. So in terms of the curriculum guidance, if you click here, it goes to This page from the CDC, Advocates for Youth, Rights, Respect, Responsibility, a K through 12 sexuality education curriculum. And whenever we get into any topic in conversation, we talk about the students' rights, not only through the law, but also their rights as a human being. We talk about their necessity to be able to respect others, but also expect respect back when it comes to these topics, and also their responsibility in being a good partner and being a good listener, and their responsibility to, in some cases, help keep themselves safe when it comes to sexual decision making, specifically when it comes to prevention of sexually transmitted diseases. So this is a specific, like I was mentioning, a specific curriculum from the 3 Rs, and we just want to, made by the CDC, Advocates for Youth, and it was adopted by the School District of Philadelphia. However, part of it is what's required to be taught, because they realized that some schools like ours only give health one half of the year. They've narrowed down 9 specific topics that they want covered. And with these 9 specific topics, there are specific lessons that are included within the school district's curriculum engine that needs to be spoken of. So it starts off basically with sexual orientation, behavior, and identity. That's going to be something that we're going to talk about this week. Understanding gender is something that has come up from time to time throughout the course of the school year. We don't dive too far into that in our school, because our school is very knowledgeable, like your generation would say woke about that. So we don't talk too much about it, but it is still something that's required to be covered. My Life, My Decisions is a series of lessons specifically about sexual decision making. 4 is Rights, Respect, Responsibility in general. And that's kind of like sums up what the whole curriculum is, but whatever. 5 is Std Smarts, which is a specific lesson that goes along with the prevention of sexually transmitted disease and core knowledge of sexually transmitted diseases. Know Your Options speaks about abstinence and various forms of contraception. It also touches upon terminating pregnancies. I am very cognizant of trying to stay neutral about any controversial topics. So when it's spoken of, we definitely speak of it concerning various options, not just abortion, but also adoption as well. So we talk about both sides of the equation. Creating condom confidence, which is basically how to correctly use a condom, select and use an external condom, and we do touch upon an internal condom as well. These are both formerly known as male and female condoms, and oftentimes still marketed that way. And then 8 and 9 we actually already did. 8 is it abuse? It was 2 lessons talking about dating violence and having the students determine whether it was part of dating violence and sexual, not sexual, and domestic violence and emotional abuse, or wasn't it? It doesn't get into sexual abuse so much in the context of the high school topics, but we do consider that a little bit when we talk about consent. And then using technology respectfully and responsibly, we talked about that with sexting and sharing information. You notice that there's no specific topic about consent. So consent is covered in My Life, My Decisions and Rights, Respect, and Responsibility. I do add lessons having to do with consent because I think it's super important. So the required 3Rs curriculum are lessons that I don't have a choice. I have to give to you, at least parts of them. Some of them I can like remove and change and move over, but the content and the concepts have to be there. It's required by school district policy. So furthermore, in this drop-down section, it talks about the top 10 reasons to support comprehensive sex education in schools and put the sex back into sex ed. These are 2 articles, one from a doctor posted on about.com, one posted on Time Magazine. And yeah, we talk about those particular topics. There's also some other drop-down menus on the front page, talking to your parents about sex. And that gives you ways and ideas to actually bring the concept up to your parents. So a lot of times parents are thinking about how to bring the concept up to their children, but children, like some of them, they don't want to talk to you because they're scared, they're embarrassed, they think that you're going to judge them, they think that they you'll be upset with them in their decision making. But and here's the sad part as a parent, and I am a parent. I have a 15-year-old son, and I have two older children that are now 30 and 26, stepchildren. But still, nonetheless, I helped raise them from the time that my 30-year-old was a 10. So it's been a long time with them. And long story short, we as parents, we have this expectation for our children. We have this expectation of how they're supposed to be raised and how we want them to be raised. And when it comes to sex, we have an idea in our head on when we want that to happen, and who we want that to be with, not the person individually, but this concept in our head and what the person's going to be like, how they're going to treat our babies. And we want all of these things to happen. And we even set rules into place about when they're allowed to do certain things, when they're allowed to start dating, when they're allowed to start being intimate. What we try to impose our boundaries, but what it really comes down to, and this is what the 3Rs curriculum kind of says, which a lot of parents don't like, but it's not me saying it, it's the whole CDC nationwide. Young people, they make their own decisions, and all we can do is give them the tools to be able to make the decisions and give them the ability to be able to make those decisions. But bottom line is, when it's all said and done, they're going to be the ones there that have to make the decisions. And, there are even laws in place, policies in place that once a child turns 14 years old, they can go into the doctor's office without their parents and answer questions to their doctor about being sexually active that the doctor's not allowed to tell their parents about. Even within schools in the state of Pennsylvania, we don't have to notify parents that we're teaching their children about sexual health type decision making from age 14 and up. So you could contact me and say you don't want your child participating in these lessons. And if your child says, I do want to participate in these lessons, I have to let them participate. So there's different rules in place. And I realize as a parent, I'm talking me personally right now, how that might be difficult for you to understand and difficult for you to accept. But the bottom line is, the young people, when they're faced with these decisions, when they're faced with this main question in their life of what role do I want sex to play in my life, they're the ones that have to make the final and ultimate decision. Whether you want them to or not is not really the question. At this point, it's here is the decision to be made. And if you are going to make these decisions, how are you going to stay safe? So a lot of times, going back to where this rambling started, a lot of times our parents are looking to speak to our students, our children, about sex. And sometimes it's easy for some of us, and sometimes it's difficult. And sometimes we avoid the topic, and sometimes we lay down the law without hearing what they have to say about it and think about it. But in other cases, it's the young people trying to speak to their parents or trying to speak to another trusted adult that they really, really trust. And how do I even bring this topic up? So I have on here for the students 10 different ways that you can start the conversation with your parents. And sometimes some of them won't work that well, depending on how your relationship is with your parents. But a lot of them will. They'll be icebreakers and let you begin. And it's ideas to be able to how to start the conversation and the communication. They definitely are not going to look at you the same way if they did not know that you were sexually active and you're telling them that you are. But it's better to be open, because if they find out that you're sneaking behind their backs, now it's a violation of trust as well as a violation of the expectations. So consider your relationship with your parents. I'm talking to my students right now. Consider your relationship with your parents, and I fully encourage you to be able to go and speak to them. That said, during the course of this unit, there's going to be topics that we speak about that may or may not go against family values based on how the family is being raised. I fully encourage communication at home about any topic that we're speaking about, for that matter, about daily topics that we're speaking about. So I'm going to try very, very, very hard to stay neutral during this, but I am going to take a stand in certain areas, such as about the risk of spreading sexually transmitted disease and the necessities that if you are sexually active, to use proper protection and to get tested regularly. Whereas other times I'm going to be like, okay, here's the situation. This could happen. This could happen. And like I typically do. So that said, There's also an expand box talking about how we really much live in a hypersexualized society. And a lot of you did the constructive response recently talking about how we, what am I doing? A lot of you did the constructive response recently talking about how love in songs has changed over the years, and you picked a song from each decade. Some of you found songs that were talking about sex right from the get-go from the 1960s, but most of you saw this vivid change in most songs that are supposed to be love songs, that instead of talking about emotional love, connection, relationships, or breakups for that matter, they started just talking about physical want, physical lust, physical attraction, physical sex, and calling that love. And so that's something that we need to consider too, is how sex has changed throughout the years. For some, they would argue that it's easier, that it's to talk about, that it is more out in the open, that today's generation is more sexually affluent, and thus they get sexually active faster because they know more. But for others, we say that that's a problem, that they're being sexually active too early, that they're being sexually active too quick, and that they're making decisions that are harmful. We're actually going to talk into the history of sexual activity when it comes to this area of the country, specifically in Philadelphia, by known data, of course. We're going to use the youth risk behavior study talking about students who admitted being sexually active in 1991 when it first started, all the way up to 2019, which is the most recent survey results. So we'll look at that at some point during the course of this unit. All right, finally, to end up this video, here we go. We're talking about the topics. So here are all the topics in the entire unit. We obviously cannot cover all of them in a month. So we're going to focus on a few. So the first one is sexual health and sexual general overview. So that's going to be what the first main topic is going to be here in our lesson, in our school year. And then we're going to speak, and it might not be exactly in this order, but we're going to talk about consent and the law involving sex. And we're going to speak about the necessity for consent and what yes means, and sexual decision-making overview. So that'll be about the actual decisions involved. And the first lesson talks about it's more than just a simple yes or no. So we'll talk about that as we go through. And we're going to focus on the prevention of sexually transmitted infections and diseases. So we're going to speak about how to prevent sexually transmitted diseases. We're going to talk about contraception, abstinence, external condoms, birth control pill. We'll do some extra special things on them. It is very likely that a lot of that is going to be asynchronous. The required lesson for STDs, not general knowledge, is a Jeopardy type game. Rest in peace, Alex Trebek. But it's a Jeopardy type game, which is really good in school. But for our purposes, it's going to be difficult to do in Zoom. We may or may not play that game. But one way or the other, we do have to go through some core knowledge review about STDs. That likely is going to be an asynchronous activity this year. Whoa, hit the wrong button. Don't know what that was. I'll talk about that in a moment. We are, instead of looking at the LGBT specific page, we're going to integrate it within most of the topics. So we're going to allow this information to transcend across sexual orientations, which, by the way, is one of the very first topics, sexual orientation. And what we're not going to talk about this year is pregnancy or puberty. So we're going to sort of talk about choices if you do get pregnant. When we talk about contraception, it's one of the required lessons, talking about choices, but we don't learn about pregnancy per se in the unit. So at some point, we are going to go through a seminar class optional that you can go to if you'd like to do that, but you can also do it on your own asynchronously. And we'll talk about pregnancy care considerations, parenting, choices if you get pregnant, and the overview of your child. We also won't go through puberty for the most part, which is a topic that's no longer required within the high school age curriculum. We've already talked about sexting, and we've already talked about dating violence, although those topics will probably come back up. The last thing I want to mention to you is the confidential question box. This is a figurative shoebox that you would stick a question in inside of a classroom. We have a Google form about it now for a few years, and you would Notice there's no place for a space for your name. You type your class period that you're in, and then you type in your question, and then you submit. And then at some point during the course of the unit, I come back to the confidential questions and we go and we read them. So this is a much longer introduction video than what I'm going to say in the course of our class, but I did want to make sure that I gave you the opportunity to be able to hear these questions, see these answers, and be able to understand what we were talking about. Thank you so much, and I'll see you with the next video, or I'll see you in class. Have a great day.